After the last movie of Daniel Craig as James Bond was out, I was satisfied with the journey. Sure, it had its flaws, but overall it was a good arc for Bond, a modern take on the character that was not as campy as the older ones. And I'm not saying, of course, that the older ones were bad. I'm only saying that this one was different and like a fresh change, a needed one actually. Actually, I appreciate many of the older movies, and I can see that several iterations of Bond were truly one-of-a-kind cinematic experiences. But anyway, I'm here to discuss with you some of my desired modifications to the quintuple Bond films of Daniel Craig. Mainly, I'm going to discuss converting the 5 Bond movies of Daniel Craig into a trilogy of movies with a more seamless and streamlined vision. And since I have mentioned the vision of the movies, I have to note that the main issue with the 5 movies is the lack of consistent vision. Daniel Craig movies suffer from a fluctuating shift of focus from one movie to another. In Casino Royale, for example, it was apparent that the world is facing a ghost-like organization, which got sidelined in the later movies, bit by bit, until it was nearly forgotten in Skyfall before it returned back somehow to the spotlight in a less spectacular manner in Spectre. So without further delay, let's discuss my suggestion for a more proper trilogy of Bond movies featuring Daniel Craig. So the first part is a bit cheating. My suggested trilogy will start with Casino Royale as it is actually. Nothing is wrong with that movie. Many fans, including myself, consider it the best Bond movie ever, maybe, or at least the best in Daniel Craig's Bond movies. I won't defend that opinion much, as it is not the scope of this video. What really matters is that this movie serves the consistent vision of the suggested trilogy in a good manner. So the way it is really good. So we should have the same artistic introduction. The first movie shows many things like how rebellious and hard-headed Bond is. His tensions with M are apparent from the start. His relationship with Vesper is naturally introduced here, and love blooms as expected. Also, Mathis and Felix are still there, so it's the same thing. The plot twist happens the same way at the end as well. So Vesper's betrayal and choice to end her life, it will gravely hurt Bond again here, and it will be impacting him forever. Bond is now angry and is out for revenge and unleashing havoc. The cliffhanger open ending plays as well as the same. Bond is following and capturing Mr. White. And now we jump to the second movie. This one will be having elements from 4 different movies, which are Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, and even No Time to Die. I would say that the main subject here would be Skyfall, but that is way too simple to explain what should be expected here. This is where things drastically change. The movie starts with the car change from Quantum of Solace, and then the failed interrogation scene with Mr. White. M is shot again and Mr. White escapes. The first difference occurs here is they are going to chase 2 traitors, not one. The one we see regularly, in Quantum of Solace, which he kills in the hanging rope fight scene in the original Quantum of Solace movie. And then the other traitor is Patrice, the assassin from Skyfall. This means that the 2 chase scenes will be playing together in a logical montage. Patrice, who is now portrayed as a traitor MI6 agent, would kill Ronson as in Skyfall, and then while escaping, as happens in the same movie, they would be fighting with Bond on the train, and an injured M would ask Eve Moneypenny to shoot. The bullet gets Bond instead of Patrice, and Patrice escapes while Bond falls to the sea. And then the main theme song plays. This one would be the main theme song of Skyfall, which would play but with some different sentences from both of Quantum of Solace and Spectre main theme songs. So Bond is thought to be dead like at the start of Skyfall, and Mallory begins making life difficult for him. For 2 years or more, Bond tries to move on with it, and settles in a tropical place, but couldn't because of his emotional attachment to Vesper and his will of revenge against Mr. White and the organization behind him. While he is torn apart between his desire to return, even though he felt like a pawn or a tool for M, we can see Dominic Green from Quantum of Solace, and he is discussing business with General Medrano, namely that scene from Quantum of Solace where he negotiates accepting the organization's terms or waiting for the next general to accept them and take over his place. So the organization seemed to be winning all over the world, and this troubles MI6. This is when Bond is back to M's surprise. M helps Bond pass a test even though his skills are not as good as before yet, so this is the same like in Skyfall. Bond starts tracking Mr. White but can't find him. The only lead is presented through Matthias, who settled down with Gemma after retirement. He tells Bond about Green and facilitates for him entering an opera house where the organization members might be meeting. Thus, the opera scene from Quantum of Solace plays with a back-to-action, furious Bond, a different one, because of his will of revenge. Green escapes, but Bond finds more information about Mr. White from Felix, his CIA friend. Mr. White seems to have left the organization and is hiding somewhere. Bond succeeds in tracing and finding him to find a broken and older Mr. White begging Bond to protect his daughter before committing suicide like in Spectre. Meanwhile, the organization is meeting and Green is killed by Mr. Hanks inside the meeting instead of Guerra. A shadowy figure is the leader of the organization, and he asks Mr. Hanks about the punishment of Mr. White, which Mr. Hanks responds with that his higher-up is working on it. Bond traces Madeleine, who is the daughter of Mr. White, and after meeting her for the first time, Madeleine refuses Bond's help. So again, like Spectre. Bond keeps monitoring her incognito to find that it seems that Patrice was tasked for sniping her dead. So Bond barely kills Patrice. Madeleine replaces Severine in this portion of the movie. The relationship begins developing. Scenes from both of Spectre and Skyfall are used for that. However, the organization kidnaps her in a boat after a fight in China. Bond tries to save her, I'm talking about Madeleine here, but is defeated by Mr. Hanks and is captured and taken to the island. He meets Mr. Hanks' boss, Raul Silva, who is an ex-MI6 operative, and the audience are surprised to meet Raul here, because this is not being played again by Javier Bardem, but instead it is played by Pierce Brosnan himself. I know, some of you watching this now are pressing the dislike button, but hear me out. This is perhaps one of the biggest wasted opportunities in movies history. And it is indeed the biggest in all Bond movies. I'm not saying he has to be the same Bond from Pierce Brosnan movies, but if they decided earlier to recast Judi Dench as the same M from these movies, why shouldn't we recast her favorite agent who was betrayed by her for the sake of the mission? This will make the whole personal matter even more personal to the audience. You know, Pierce Brosnan Bond was once sacrificed as well by M and MI6 in the movie Die Another Day. So the concept itself can work in an alternate timeline or in an incident we didn't see on screen. So in that case, Pierce Brosnan as Raul Silva would be the perfect opponent to newer Bond. The marksman shot scene happens again, but Bond calls reinforcement before Madeleine gets killed, unlike what happened in the original movie to Severine. Raoul gets captured, as in Skyfall. He faces M during interrogation and shows her what she did to him physically and emotionally. So again, the personal matter thing is more personal here. Bond opens up to Madeleine about Vesper, and she also opens up to him by mentioning the trauma she had when one of her father's enemies came home when she was a child and killed her mother and even tried killing her. This is of course from the opening scene from No Time to Die. Things turn out to be well, but then, as happened in Skyfall, while M is being interrogated by Mallory and the government, Raoul executes his plan to do the bombings in London and MI6 HQ. He also plans to kill M, but Eve helps Bond to reach M and save her. Raoul escapes and the final duel plays the same as in Skyfall, except that we never get to know the real name of Bond is really Bond. I mean, Bond in my suggested trilogy is a code name, not a real one. Raoul is defeated here, but M dies as well. My change for the ending is to give a Daniel Craig versus Pierce Brosnan face-to-face fighting scene, which we didn't have in Skyfall. Another major change is that M and Raoul die together, forgiving each other for their sins. In the finale, we would be borrowing scenes from Quantum of Solace, where Bond exposes Yusuf, who turns out to be the person who tricked Vesper to betray Bond and MI6 in Casino Royale. Bond delivers him to Mallory, who became the next M, and then drives away with Madeleine Swan. And in a post-credit scene, yes, we have a post-credit scene in my trilogy, we can see the shadowy figure leading another meeting and congratulating the organization's members for defeating MI6 and getting rid of M. We can also see Mr. Hanks wearing the Spectre ring and taking Raoul's position after his death. Now that was a long turn of events, but I used this sequel to return back to the original consistent vision. I kept the strong themes in the lore and removed some of the bad decisions. Some might agree with my suggestions, I understand it, and others might find them not fitting their liking. I totally understand. With that said, let's check the last one. The last movie is No Time to Die. The movie starts the same way as the original No Time to Die. So Madeleine Swan and James Bond got to Vesper's grave, and then the chase begins, ending with him breaking up with her after losing trust between them. The movie is mainly No Time to Die except for two things. There is no Rami Malek. We don't need him, thank you very much. I have nothing against Rami as a very good actor, but the script given to him was really bad. That villain was one of the least memorable ones in the whole series. So instead of fixing him, I'm concentrating again on Spectre. Heracles' virus is taken and the scientist Oproshev is kidnapped like in No Time to Die. Bond is asked to return to MI6 after 5 years of leaving Swan. So the rest of the movie is a combination between the unused scenes from Spectre and No Time to Die. So Eve Moneypenny and Q join Bond in his search for the heads of the organization. Q is introduced here the way he was introduced in the original Skyfall. Numi from original No Time to Die is there as well and acts as a rival to Bond, since there are now like competing heads inside the force and suspiciously want to join together MI5 and MI6. Mallory M and Max C are having the same power struggle again here. Meanwhile, Bond gets the organization's membership ring in Mexico like the first scene of original Spectre. So after inspecting the ring, Q connects the dots, showing that all the villains faced by Bond were part of the organization that is called Spectre, and that they are also behind the abduction of the scientist responsible for Heracles. Bond infiltrates the Spectre's meeting and the head of the organization is revealed to be Blofeld, who knew Bond is here, so again it's from Spectre. Bond barely escaping from Mr. Hanks after a car chase, and then Q also helps identifying the main goal of the organization, which is to use Max for having control over the Nine Eyes surveillance initiative, which would garner them unlimited monitoring over the world or the whole thing. From there, original final scenes of Spectre play regularly. Max is defeated through getting killed by Mallory, and Blofeld is captured while escaping. However, Heracles' case was not solved yet. That is until Felix asked Bond for help in extracting the scientist Oproshev from Cuba, and he would be held by Numi and Agent Paloma. Yes, she definitely should be there. However, the operation turns out to be a trap from Blofeld, who could see everything from his prison using a bionic eye. This is from No Time to Die. And he tried to use Heracles' virus to kill Bond, except that Bond fled and other members of Spectre died. So Felix is betrayed by Logan Ash, a fellow CIA agent, and dies from his wound in the ocean like in the original No Time to Die movie. Bond returns to interrogate Blofeld, who refuses to talk unless in the presence of Madeleine Swan. Blofeld is amused to see Bond suffering without her after all these years. He confesses that it was his plan to make Bond think she betrayed him like Vesper did long ago. Swan leaves the place not capable of facing Bond. So Bond goes after her and tries reconciling with her, asking for forgiveness. He discovers that he has a beautiful daughter called Matilda. And, meanwhile, Mr. Hanks is making now an attack on prison in order to free Blofeld. He uses Heracles here. Other Spectre members try assassinating Bond and his family. They were able to kidnap his love and daughter. Bond kills Hanks and Logan Ash after getting information about the whereabouts of Blofeld and his family. Bond and Numi travel together to the island of Blofeld, which is the same island used by Rami Malek in the original No Time to Die. During the infiltration mission, Bond had to surrender to save his loved ones. The torturing scene in Spectre plays here. And no, Blofeld is not the stepbrother of Bond in this trilogy. He is a well-written villain seeking world dominance, and that's not because he was jealous of Bond when they were kids like in the original movie. I didn't like this at all. So I'm changing it. Bond is able to unleash a detonation sequence for the whole island to destroy the biological weaponry threat and also free his family. However, at the end, he had to stay in the island after being infected by the virus during his last encounter with Blofeld. I'm sorry, the original ending was heartbreaking, I know, but it was still, a memorable closure to the story arc. So yes, the ending stays the same. Numi becomes Jane Bond, retaining the name and the legacy with the help of Mallory and, Q and Moneypenny, so they are all together. Madeleine raises her child, and from inside, she forgives Bond for leaving her the last 5 years. She tells her daughter of his story through bedtime tales, and that's it. I hope you have liked the tour. I'm not saying that my suggested trilogy may be satisfying for everyone, but I think it gives interesting approaches, and I assume it will be accepted by many who felt a better treatment could have been given to the end material here. Now what remains is to pinpoint some final notes about the suggested trilogy. They are just closing remarks to answer some of the questions that you might be thinking of. Okay, so first, Matthias isn't dead. Yes, for me, he deserved a peaceful life after retirement. And also, we never meet Camille Montes too. And probably if she existed somewhere, she could have been killed by Green or General Medrano, but off screen. We don't know anything about her in this trilogy. I liked her, but she is a deviation to the plot and had to be sacrificed. Same thing for Strawberry Fields, because again, it didn't happen in Quantum of Solace in our version. Additionally, Q is not introduced until the final movie in order to give more room to the actual events in the second movie. Remember, the second movie contains scenes from 4 different movies. So that's the thing here. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I would like to hear your opinions and suggestions down below in the comments. And thank you.